Ask him to go bigger instead of asking us to go smaller.
Democratic Representatives Cori Bush and Jamaal Bowman had a very lively appearance on CNN, tearing apart CNN's John Berman over his ridiculous questions. Now, before I get to these clips, I first want to show you this clip from yesterday involving Bernie and Joe Manchin. And the reason I'm showing you this is I want you to listen to the reporter's question at the end of this, as this applies to what I'll be discussing with the CNN clips.
Get a picture. Get a picture of us. Get a picture of us, huh? We're talking. All right, we're talking.
You're going to have a resolution by the end of the week, it sounds like?
We're talking. We're going to make some progress.
Senator Sanders, you prepared to make some deep cuts to climate change and other things like that?
Listen to that question at the end. The only question there directed to a specific senator is directed to Bernie Sanders, asking if he's willing to have deep cuts to climate change and other provisions. Instead of maybe asking Joe Manchin, why did you break the promise to support $3.5 trillion? Why are you okay with cutting investments into the climate crisis when there is this climate crisis raging? Why are you okay with families not getting a child tax credit? But no, Bernie gets the question. Is he willing to cut more? As I've said a million times, framing how media frames the discussion is everything. And that's what we get to here with this CNN clip. So watch how CNN's John Berman here frames these questions. And in this case, you're going to have Cori Bush and Jamaal Bowman tear him apart.
You talk about the people in your districts and what they're asking for. How do you tell them that the possibility of nothing is better than the possibility of everything?
But why is that the possibility? I'm sorry, Cori, go ahead.
No, but that's.
Well, will you vote if it's a $1.5 trillion plan that gets to the floor? Will you vote against it?
But that's the expectation. The expectation is we will give you crumbs and expect you to be happy. What we're saying is I didn't come to Congress to continue to give crumbs to my community. St. Louis continues to get crumbs, and we keep being number one for homicide, number one or number two for homicides, number one for police murder, number one for the murder of children. We keep having those issues. We keep having issues with black children being 10 times as likely to go to the hospital, in emergency room for asthma than white children. How do we fix those things? You have to put the money there. And so I didn't come to Congress to sit back and accept those crumbs. Give my folks the meal. And that is why we're here, to push that.
Don't ask us why aren't we willing to compromise. Ask Joe Manchin,
Yes.
is he okay with violence in our communities continuing, public housing falling apart, Black and brown people disproportionately dying from COVID, the climate crisis? Ask him to go bigger instead of asking us to go smaller.
To be clear, we're asking every member, where they're going to go and where the possible agreements can be reached. Paul Begala was on earlier today and talked about progress versus perfection.
That's not even, but we're talking about a package that is not even perfection.
$3.5 trillion was the compromise.
Right, that was the compromise. This is not
President
perfection.
Biden came in at $6 trillion.
Incredible job here by Jamaal Bowman and Cori Bush. And I have a second clip coming up that adds even more context to the conversation. But before I get there, let me just discuss this. As I've said, framing is everything. It puts a particular perspective on the debate that limits the idea of what is possible. So in this case, CNN's sentiment is essentially, why aren't you progressives willing to compromise? Which makes the audience think, yeah, why aren't these progressives compromising? When the reality is they have compromised. They wanted $10 trillion. So to give you an example, Sunrise Movement here that was pushing for this and had lawmakers on board, why Sunrise is demanding $10 trillion in investment over 10 years. So they go on to say here that in the last year of World War II, America spent 40% of our GDP in 1 year on the war, equivalent to $8.5 trillion in 2021 alone. So Sunrise Movement here isn't even asking for, 8.5 a year. They're asking for 10 trillion over 10 years. So already in what they're asking for, they're already kind of compromising here. but they're saying, hey, back in World War II, we spent what is equivalent to 8.5 trillion in 1 year. So that went down to 6 trillion, went down even further to 3.5 trillion. And Joe Manchin wants even more compromise. The media framing on this discussion is so out of whack. Why aren't they going to Joe Manchin, who, by the way, let me just first point this out. Joe Manchin told the White House the child tax credit must include a firm work requirement and family income cap in the $60,000 range, Axios has learned. These demands would dramatically weaken one of Biden's signature programs. So has any mainstream media reporter asked Joe Manchin, how can you think kids whose parents make $30,000 each a year, how can you think they aren't worthy of assistance when you are worth at least $7 million and you gave your own kids jobs? Ryan Grimm here, Manchin's own children, runs the coal company Manchin launched as a state senator, and 2 got a job at Mylan run by Manchin's friend, cornered the market on EpiPen, and got a golden parachute of $30 million. Now he's insisting on work requirements for child tax credit. Why isn't the reporter out referencing this, asking Joe Manchin, how can you possibly require a work requirement for this child tax credit when you yourself, a millionaire, gave your kids jobs? But no, that isn't the framing. The framing is, Bernie, why don't you support cuts to the climate crisis? Absolutely ridiculous. And so, you know, and the obvious point here with this budget bill, but before I get to this next clip, is just look at it. Yes, there are great provisions in this budget bill, but it is not the Bernie Sanders agenda. There is no Medicare for all. It already is a compromise just based on what is in it. To ask even more compromise from the only people who have compromised is completely absurd. Now, let me get to this last clip where Jamaal Bowman and Cori Bush add even more context to this whole discussion.
Again,
Yes.
and I'm making
Yes.
the argument that Joe Manchin
No,
is making
yes.
here because he's not sitting here, but he would say 1.5 trillion isn't crumbs.
We're paying for 1.5, first of all. So we have the offsets. This is key.
Tell Joe
It's-
Manchin to come
yeah.
to my district.
That's right.
Tell him to come to my district. Tell him to meet with me, and I'll take him to see what happens when you give a little of something, and you expect people to live off of that. Because what'll happen is that 1.5 trillion or whatever it turns out to be that he wants, we can't expect anything. We can't expect other big investments to come right after that. It'll be, oh, we did something for you.
Mm-hmm. We spend $7.6 trillion on the military alone every 10 years.
Yes.
And it's okay for us to spend that money. No one bats an eye. But we're looking to spend 3.5 over 10 years. That most of it is paid for on a bottom-up economy to target those most vulnerable. And we have a problem with that.
Can you imagine a CNN morning show hosted by Jamaal Bowman and Cori Bush? How much better that would be? You have here the way these questions should be framed from the perspective of people that actually need help. So the media's job is supposed to be out there representing the interests of people, the public at large. But oftentimes they don't do that. They're more focused on drama and ratings and defending corporations and the wealthy. Now, some of it is intentional, some of it isn't. It's simply the company they keep. So when they're around lobbyists, when they're around people in power, the wealthy, then they take on that worldview, and then they think that's the way that most Americans view things, when obviously it's not. But that's why I also mentioned in my video yesterday how the media should be out there asking people, how would these certain provisions help your life? Like a mother who can't afford to go back to work because she has to take care of her child. How would universal pre-K or investments into childcare and the child tax credit, how would that help your life? Or talk to a senior who can't afford dental. How would expanding Medicare to include dental, hearing, and vision, how would that impact your life? But instead, when they do these out in the field reports, it's usually talking to Trump supporters. How about talking to people that actually need help and want to see these provisions? As you look at polling, everything in the budget bill is supported by the vast majority of Americans. So there is a lot of content out there ripe for CNN or any other cable news outlet to actually go and discuss, but they don't do that. Instead, they're focused on defending the wealthy and focused on drama and various fights. But the last point here, I want to bring up this from CNBC here. Just one child tax credit payments reduced financial anxiety for 56% of families. So when Cori Bush mentions, as she mentioned in that clip, if you do pass, a crumbs for people, then lawmakers will think, well, we already did something for you, so stop complaining, which is why they are fighting to pass something substantial that people actually feel. Because you're not going to have, and if all you care about is winning elections, voters are not going to come out and vote for you if all you gave them was crumbs. They have to feel some actual impact in their lives. So by extending, for example, the child tax credit that people will actually feel going on over the next 2 years and 4 years, then that will be more likely to help people to realize, hey, this party, this administration is actually helping my life. My life has improved now because of their investments in the child tax credit or Medicare expansion or negotiating prescription drug prices, whatever it is. They will actually feel those benefits. But you're not going to feel the benefits if all people get is crumbs, or in the case of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, just a corporate giveaway. So, you know, it's rare to have these moments on these networks. I cover them enough that people may think that this happens all the time, but it's not. I cover them because this is news. This usually does not happen. It is rare to get this kind of perspective on cable news, and it was great to see Jamaal Bowman and Cori Bush out there educating people.